Welcome to the Daily Exchange, guys. We're back here and we're talking with Steve Kokkinos, the man himself behind Algorand. Well, he's not completely behind it, but right after this about everything to do with consensus, auctions, buybacks, all those kinds of things. We'll see you guys in a sec. Guys, we're back. I've got Steve Kokkinos. Welcome to the Daily Exchange, Steve.
Thanks, Fred, for having me. It's great to be here.
Cool, awesome. Now, bit of background, Steve. You are the CEO of Algorand, and that's very exciting. So, next generation blockchain, I'd say. We've got auctions, buybacks to talk about today. We've got we're going to talk a little bit about Silvio, the man, the Turing Award Nobel Prize winning man behind Algorand.
Turing Prize winning, not Nobel.
Okay, Turing Prize. My apologies. I guess it's the Nobel Prize of computing. I think that's what I was supposed to say.
That's right.
My mistake. Good. I like that pickup. Steve, tell us, kick us off. Give us a quick overview. What is Algorand?
So Algorand is a few different things. Algorand is a technology that was developed by Silvio, so next generation blockchain, and really designed to overcome some of the technical limitations of some of the first-gen platforms, specifically sort of wasteful power consumption, computation. All transactions are immediately final, so there's no way to change it. There's no sort of waiting. Transactions happen in a little under 5 seconds on average. And so one of the goals is to be able to process sort of real-time payments and handle them at scale. And I think it's really down to some groundbreaking computer science that was designed by Silvio and the rest of his team at MIT. And our sort of view on the world is that on the one hand, blockchains need to perform better and need to be able to really scale up to serve the whole world in a decentralized way. They need to do it in a public, permissionless way that allows anyone to join and can't be censored. But then beyond that, our view is that if you look at kind of the developer world, there's 20 million developers out there that create apps every month. Only about 100,000 of them are working on blockchain. And so we think that the developer experiences, the end user experiences have to be really, really simple. And we need to do a lot of work to bring new people into the community so that it's not just about kind of the same crypto folks. And I think our goal is to really, try to find different ways to encourage people to participate, kind of across the board.
Okay, so let's talk about, there's a lot of blockchains right now in the market. What are the features that make Algorand stand out?
Sure. Well, a couple of different things. I think one, performance. If you look at the blockchain trilemma that Vitalik posed, a couple of years ago, it's that you can pick two out of scalability, decentralization, and security. And I think we're one of sort of the first platforms that really proved that you don't have to pick two. If you go solve the hard problems from the ground up, you can have all three of them. And so I think one is to really be an underlying layer one platform that can enable people to build any sort of application they want, scales to billions of users, and very but is still very open and supports, I think, really kind of the ethos of decentralized systems. One of the things we've seen a lot of platforms do is by centralizing, you can get much higher performance, but then you lose a lot of the benefits of the system. So that's one. The second is, we believe that there are a lot of people that want to issue financial products in the blockchain, want to build decentralized applications, but that smart contracts are often just too complicated for people. If you look at the need for formal verification, if you look at the amount of money that people have lost over time, we're really trying to make it much, much simpler. And so some of that comes from sort of developer tools and experiences, but the other is just thinking about what people need. Silvio released a blog post this week about our fungible token strategy. And so that's our ability to create new tokens. It's all done in layer one. All apps are compatible with each other. Every token that someone issues gets the safety and security of the protocol, i.e., it's not subject to a smart contract that could have a bug or you could get wrong in some other way. And the idea also is that there's a series of templates that people will be able to use to make it really straightforward to create sort of any asset of their own. And beyond just simple tokens, spend a lot of time thinking about what else exists out in the financial community. And we're the first crypto member of ISDA, the International Swaps and Derivatives Association. And one of the next things we'll be doing is bringing kind of their entire common model, which represents all forms of kind of known financial instruments on chain, to make it really really simple for people to build any sort of application they want using any sort of financial tool that they may need.
So what? Maybe just to break it down. So with obviously Algorand, where do you see the key target market for Algorand?
Yeah, it's a combination of I'd say different groups. I'd say on the one hand, if you look at our developer focus and developer tools, it's people who are creating new DApps, especially folks focused on DeFi, and really kind of bringing new apps to the decentralized world. On the flip side, we also see there's a lot of people in more traditional finance that are trying to cross over into crypto and decentralization, and we want to make it really simple for them. So I think it's sort of a cross section of different people. But I think as opposed to some of the projects that are more focused on creating kind of a Web3 operating system that would replace say parts of AWS, we're more focused on I'd say sort of the layer one infrastructure and how we make it really easy for people to do a lot of the tasks that they've been needing.
Okay. Now, in terms of with Silvio, what sort of key things does he sort of bring to the project? Tell us about his involvement.
Yeah, well, I think Silvio, first of all, is a fascinating guy, and obviously is from Italy, grew up there, and then went to Berkeley in the '80s. And by all accounts, Silvio is one of, along with a couple of other people, the founders of modern cryptography. And I think whether it's some of the standards used on the internet, or things like zero knowledge proofs or verifiable random functions, all kind of critical elements of blockchains and cryptocurrency, he's invented a lot of them. And so I think perspective of somebody who's not only, I think contributed a lot to the scientific world, but also had a hand in seeing kind of the benefit of public standards of tools that can be used, broadly around the world. I think is really great when we're really trying in a lot of ways to re-engineer systems so that they democratize parts of the financial world that are typically.
In terms of the technology, Steve, let's talk about that specifically. Tell us, Algorand has a unique consensus mechanism, which is obviously you talked about that with the trilemma. It's extremely quick. We've done some tests on it here as well, and it's extremely fast. I'm interested. Can you tell us about this consensus mechanism? I guess it's quite challenging to talk about, but sort of in a simple way.
Yeah, I think we can. Let's take a crack at it here.
Yeah.
I think that it's the most clever piece of engineering of all the things that have been done at Algorand, and I think it starts with the design. And in its simplest form, Algorand is a cryptographic lottery. And if you think about a system like Bitcoin, where the miners control the network, in Algorand, it's the opposite. The users control the network. So every user who's a part of the system can be called on at any time to either propose a block or confirm a block. And the way this works is pretty clever. Every user and every block runs a cryptographic lottery on their own computer. Nobody knows who the winner is. So one person gets a winning ticket saying they're the proposer. Let's say 1,000 other people get a ticket saying they're one of the people to confirm the block. Those votes are circulated along with the block itself. And as soon as a majority of votes is received, then that block is confirmed and moves on. The interesting part is that, and really what makes Algorand secure and very hard to attack, is that nobody knows who the block proposer is or who the block confirmers are until after the block is already confirmed, because they don't need to communicate with each other, and there's no network to communicate with because they're forming the network themselves. And so as a result, when you go and try to attack them after you learn who they are, it's too late because the block has already been circulated. And attacking them again is of no use because every single block has a new proposer and every single block has a new committee of confirmers. And so it's very, very difficult to kind of use traditional methods to attack it. But also as a result, the lottery they run is trivial in terms of computation. It's done securely, but it's very fast. And really, the only limit on how quickly transactions can be processed in Algorand is the speed of the network behind it. So it's really how quickly the block can be circulated, and any faster than that, a blockchain can't really be.
Okay, so we've got Bitcoin sort of does transactions around sort of every I guess every block sort of 10 minutes. Now Algorand's got this new thing called self-validating transactions.
That's right.
Tell us about that. Like how fast are these?
Well, self-validating transactions are sort of a different concept that allow people, effectively to transact off-chain, but then bring those transactions back on-chain. And so, in theory, you can have very, very high velocity transactions that are happening kind of off-chain, but then people will use the chain to get a proof originally,
Hmm.
so that you have something to check against, and then you can always go back to the chain to confirm that. But what it really enables is a very simple way of doing truly peer-to-peer transactions or high velocity. So it's sort of, we see that there's certain things that the blockchain is really good at, which is verifying and generating proofs. It's much less efficient at computation and handling these high velocity operations. And so that's why we think that you need the public permissionless blockchain to be able to generate those proofs and allow people to transact honestly, but then you also need to be able to bring it back on chain when you need to.
So the self-validating transactions sound a bit like the other proposed scaling solutions to Bitcoin, like Lightning or things like that. Is that sort of equivalent?
I think technically they're very different in the way they actually work. There's no idea of an open channel in Algorand self-validating transactions. So it's not sort of an exact analog for Lightning, but it is definitely a way for transactions to happen more flexibly. And
Makes sense. Now, with the let's talk about the token staking and relay nodes, which are quite fascinating. We've got obviously the advantage that Algorand, obviously that there is the ability to hold it, and you can obviously speculate on that. But you can also validate and relay nodes. Tell us about how does this work?
part of the protocol, and I think it's important to note, is that the more tokens that are participating in the consensus protocol, the more tokens that are online, the more secure the network is. And so, a core part of the value of the algo token is in support of the consensus protocol. And the more users there are, again, it sort of strengthens all of the properties. So it's not the case that more users, more nodes slows the network down. In our case, more users and more nodes makes it more secure and actually makes it more efficient. So I think that's important to know. Now, there's two kinds of nodes in the network. One are participation nodes, and those are the nodes that you use for your tokens, and you vote with those and participate in consensus. There's a second kind of node called a relay node, and I think one of the really specific technical details that makes Algorand special is that protocols talk about how the protocol itself is resistant to attack, but they often fail to mention what would happen if you took over the underlying network that the protocol is running on. And because of the way Algorand is designed, it doesn't have to trust the underlying network. So that's not an assumption that we have to make. And as a result, the idea behind relay nodes is that you want blocks circulated around the network as quickly as possible on sort of very high speed networks and high capacity servers. And then you want sort of anybody to vote, even if they're on slower machines, they can do that at a different pace, but without slowing down the network. And so but at the same time, anybody can run a relay node, anybody can run a participation node. The entire protocol is so anybody is welcome. That's the idea behind relay nodes. We enable blocks to be circulated very quickly, and that helps. If you look since launch, our average block completion time is about 4.3 seconds, and I don't believe we've ever seen a block complete in over 4.5. So I think definitely it's contributed to good performance.
So right now, what can I guess what's the value for users in holding Algorand tokens? What can they I guess do with them?
Yeah, well, there's a few different things out there for sure. One is there's a number of platforms that accept algos as a form of payment. Some of them are staking providers like PureStake, or runtime verification. Algo Capital is a VC fund that's denominated in algos. They just made an announcement today that they closed a $200 million US round, or US equivalent. Asset Block accepts algos to invest in commercial real estate. And so, we're the whole group. And the second are anybody who's building on Algorand needs to have algos, because algos are the unit that's used in order to fuel their application and pay for transaction fees to allow those to run. So an example there, PureStake last week announced an API service similar to like Infura on Ethereum that allows people to build on top of Algorand without having to run their own node infrastructure in this. So, we're seeing kind of, as of today, we've got, several dozen companies that are both accepting algos as payment and building on top of the platform. And so, we're continuing to, we continue to be excited to see how that's growing, even in the short time we've been live.
Okay, and then I guess with the tokens, I guess what's sort of required to run a node? How much does it cost to run a node?
Yeah, it depends. So participation node could be, we've had folks test it on Raspberry Pi, but you could run on a laptop or any sort of server. Relay nodes have telemetry built in, and the network will kind of validate whether you have enough bandwidth and it's sort of fast enough to be able to handle that. So when you register your node, it kind of checks that it's functioning properly and contribute to the network. But yeah, relay nodes, by virtue of the fact that they're relaying a lot of bandwidth, tend to be more expensive. And so, people just need to understand that. But participation nodes are, lightweight and pretty inexpensive to run. Virtually anybody could do that.
And how many tokens do you need for running each of those nodes?
There's no specific number of tokens that are needed in either case. Obviously, the more tokens you have, the more influence you have over the network, the more voting power, the more likely you are to be selected to propose a block. But there's no, if you have a single token, you could run either.
Right, makes sense. So you have more tokens, you have more influence on the network, and you're more likely to get paid a bounty for processing the transactions.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Let's talk about now, Steve, the Dutch auctions. So this is a new area. We've got a little video here for everyone. It's just an example of how it works. Joel, if you want to spool that up so that everyone can see, it's an incredible mechanism whereby, unlike other I guess, token sales, Algorand has a very unique function. We'll just spin the video to give everyone a bit of an intro. Steve, if that's okay. Joel, if you
Suppose there are 3 participants in the auction: Alice, Bob, and Chloe. There are 500 total algos available at a starting price of $10. Alice commits $250 at $10 per algo and therefore stands to receive at least 25 algos. Her bid drops the total algo supply from 500 to 475. Time passes and the price periodically drops without Alice, Bob, or Chloe bidding. The price then drops to $5. Alice now stands to receive at least 50 algos. Now Bob participates in the auction by committing $150 when the price is $5 per algo. He stands to receive at least 30 algos. His bid drops the total supply from 450 to 420. Time passes and the price periodically drops without Alice, Bob, or Chloe bidding. The price then drops to $2. Alice, with her $250 commitment, now stands to receive at least 125 algos, and Bob, with his $150 commitment, stands to receive at least 75 algos. Chloe commits $600 at $2 per algo and therefore stands to receive at least 300 algos. Her bid drops the total algo supply from 500 to 0, which clears the auction. At the clearing price of $2 and total commitments of $1,000, all 500 algos, the original supply, are distributed to bidding participants. Alice walks away with 125 algos, Bob gets 75 algos, and Chloe ends up with 300 algos, in that order. To learn more about algo auctions and find out when the next auction will take place, visit algorand.foundation/auction.
Okay, makes that really helps in terms of explaining. So we've got a Dutch auction, Steve. Now, just a question I do have: in the actual mechanism of this auction, do you, as you're going along, do you confirm the price during the auction? Can you change your price? How does that sort of work?
Yeah, well, so in kind of so first of all, I guess taking a step back, Algorand implemented Dutch auctions as a way of kind of seeking a fair price in the market, um, and that's an open source sort of auction protocol that we created, and anybody can use on the Algorand blockchain or elsewhere if they wanted. And the Algorand Foundation used the auction kind of for the first token sale, and the idea is that one, people were permitted to pre-bid, so they could sort of file bids ahead of time. But when the auction starts, there's a specified period of time, and it starts at the maximum price, and then goes down to the reserve price. And if there isn't enough interest at the reserve price, the auction ends. But provided there is, then it closes sort of somewhere in between those two. And people can change their bids along the way. For instance, if you set a really low bid and the prices looks like the auction will fill up before it gets down to your price, then people can change their bid and increase their price. But fundamentally, the idea behind the Dutch auction is that you are finding the lowest price that clears the auction. Everybody gets the same price when the auction closes.
Okay, so same price for everyone, and as you're going along, you can change your price. That makes sense. Why did you guys choose this method as opposed to sort of just a fixed price?
Yeah, well, we looked at sort of different models that had been used, and I think if you look at a lot of projects that sort of set the price, it's a little bit arbitrary. Other times, exchanges or other places will set a price. Our view was from early on, we decided we never wanted to be setting a price for the token. We wanted the market to determine what they thought the right price was, and that was really the concept behind the auction mechanism. And we're glad that the foundation ended up using that as sort of the way to run the first token sale.
And we've got this auction is actually this sale token sales over 5 years. We've got a little graph here, Joel, if you want to bring up in terms of the supply. So eventually we will end up with I guess 10 billion algos, and I'm interested. Maybe you can sort of walk us through. We've got this supply over. I guess we've had the first auction. Is that right?
That's right. There's been one auction.
One auction, and then how many other auctions are there planned to happen from here?
Well, in part, the foundation looks at supply and demand and sort of will determine, the cadence. The chart that you're looking at shows that would be the fastest time that all tokens went into circulation. In all likelihood, it'll probably take considerably longer than that to reach kind of the maximum number of tokens. Okay. And tokens into circulation through participation, through node running, through auctions. There's a variety of different ways.
And so with the auction supply, it seems to be increasing over time. Is there a reason for that in terms of I guess there's more usage, or what's the strategy behind that?
Yeah, well, I think over time, if you have more people using the network, there's more need for transaction fees. When people have different, as there's more financial products, the algo is sort of the primary token, and so as the network grows and there's more people online, it just sort of drives a requirement for more tokens. I think additionally, as there's more people, you want more tokens online, securing the protocol. That enhances kind of the running of consensus, and so. Again, all those factors kind of weigh in. And overall, there should be a balance of tokens that are online supporting the protocol and tokens that are sort of transacting and being used for financial transactions.
Okay, and then there is, I guess, do you think is there a risk of potentially there's being more tokens, obviously. Than needs to be used, and that might affect price over the short term?
I think the market has to sort of decide the right thing. I think the kind of primary goal is to make sure that consensus is secure and the network is running, and I think that's kind of factors in. And again, the market will kind of figure out what it sees as sort of the right value for the network and price of the token.
Makes sense. Now let's talk about the buyback. It's an interesting mechanism you guys have. So just to give a bit of background, maybe do you want to just talk? How does the token buyback system work, Steve?
Yeah, so there's a refund policy that all auction participants, anybody who purchases tokens at auction, receives. And the idea behind that refund was really to bring new people into the market. One of the things that we saw is that there's, a lot of people are interested in crypto and blockchain, but are also concerned about volatility and kind of what that means for them. So the idea behind refund is for people to be able to come in, transact with their tokens, see how the net platform works, but do that with very limited financial risk. And I think that generated a lot of attention for sure.
And I agree as well. It seems to be a major thing. Just a couple of questions. People who buy from the official sale or they buy on the secondary market, do both of them get the buyback mechanism, or is it just only the auction?
No, only people purchase at the auction,
Right.
and only people. There's a number of excluded jurisdictions in terms of who can participate at the auction as well.
Okay, and I guess in terms of the buying on the auction and then buying them on the secondary market, are there any differences between the two apart from the buyback mechanism?
The tokens are the same. A token is a token, so they're fungible. So otherwise the tokens are the same.
Makes sense. And I guess what are sort of some of the incentives you've seen in terms of holding the tokens as opposed to I guess selling them back?
Sure. Well, there's a few different things. One, there's a participation reward that exists for anybody who wants to have their token supporting the protocol. We've seen that as very very successful, and the foundation publishes the current reward rates on their site. The other is there was a substantial staking program that's actually wrapping up in a few days that the foundation announced. It was a 200 million token staking program that runs over a 2-year period, with the idea being to have a number of tokens that are kind of staked and online and supporting the protocol long term, and that looks like it's been quite successful also. So I think really again going back to the thing I mentioned earlier. From again from a technical standpoint, one of the big differences in a proof of stake platform, especially pure proof of stake like Algorand, is that the more users, the more tokens that are online and supporting the protocol, the more secure it becomes, which is different than proof of work like Bitcoin or others, where it's the amount of miners and hash power that are securing the network. And so as a result, a lot of the incentives that exist in the system are there. To make sure that people, want to kind of stay online and support the protocol.
Fantastic. Steve, you've got an Australian tour coming to join us.
Yeah. Yeah, come down there. It's our first Australian tour for Algorand.
Yeah, fantastic. I guess anything, in terms of people who are looking to purchase Algorand, was there anything you guys are looking to talk about what's coming up or sort of the roadmap? What are some of the things you're looking at right now?
Yeah, so a few different things. So Sylvia posted a blog post yesterday about our Layer 1 token strategy, about multi-party transactions. I think it's really interesting tech that's going to lead to a variety of different things. We announced probably about a month ago that Tether is going to be launching on Algorand. As well as sort of in addition to the other chains they're already on. I think that's a great use case. Stable coins, and Algo Capital just announced the closing of their round today, and with it, their first 4 portfolio companies. Securitize is one of them, which is a security token platform. IDEX, which is a decentralized exchange, is another. So I think we've got a lot of really interesting, applications and use cases that are kind of spinning up in the really near future, and so. I think that's something that we look forward to talking with people more about next week in Australia. And I think beyond that, I think there's kind of a series of new innovations. We'll continue to do those ourselves, but then there's about 100 different companies that are contributing to the platform right now. and contributing to the code base, contributing new use cases. So I think we're really excited to see all the things that are starting to build up from that. So it's been a great start since launch.
Brilliant. Now, for anyone who wants to get involved with the Australian tour, I believe if you go to algorand.com/Australia,
Yes.
that's the place to visit. Steve, we do have a final question. Very excited about your roadshow coming up. We ask everyone on the show one question, which is what do you think the price of Bitcoin will be on New Year's Eve 2019 in US dollars, or people have answered in all sorts of ways. I'm just sort of giving you some time to think of your number. What is your number, Steve? We've got a montage. This is not financial advice. We do not give financial advice on this show, but interested in what your number is.
I know this is a pretty big spectrum here. My guess is it's probably in the 12,000 range.
12,000. There it
Your
is.
number. What's your number?
What's that?
What's your number?
That's a good question. I should come up with a number. I don't have a number currently, Steve, but I will figure one out and I'll come back to you on that one. Good idea.
You can write it down. I don't actually give any sort of price feedback, but I think in the case of Bitcoin, it's a sport, so it's okay.
It is a bit of a sport. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us on the Daily Exchange and telling everyone about. Remember, guys, Algorand. You can check out the site. Check out the tour coming up, and there's some exciting stuff. Check out those blog posts as well. We'll put the links in the description below. Steve, thank you for joining us on the Daily Exchange. All right, guys, do subscribe. Do follow us. Check us out on all the other videos. We've got some exciting stuff coming up, and we'll see you guys later. Yeah.